There are grave concerns over the future of Reading Football Club under Dai Yongge's ownership regime. Reading fans are protesting against Dai Yongge. Dai Yongge, they've set up a group called Sell Before We Dai, which has gained a lot of support. But why are fans protesting against him? Well, repeated failure to pay players' wages in full and on time on 3 separate occasions. This could have happened at other times last season, but the sponsor Select Car Leasing, owned by the Reading fans, twice stepped in with a loan to cover player payroll. A total of 16 points have been deducted on Dai Yongge's watch. There's been repeated failure to pay HMRC in full and on time, leading to numerous transfer embargoes. Non-playing staff have not been paid properly for November 2023. Non-playing staff have been sent redundancy letters before Christmas 2023. And key coaching personnel in Andrew Sparks and Eddie Needsweeki have been made redundant back in January 2024. Key players have been lined up for sale without the prior approval of manager/head coach Rubén Sellés or the head of football operations, Mark Bowen, and a wave of drastic cost-cutting measures detailed by The Athletic, the removal of catering for players at the training ground, hotel stays for away games scrapped, and a lack of heating for office staff. A terrible mess at Reading Football Club. Something needs to be done. People need to listen, and there needs to be change for the Royals. Specifically, an end to Dai Yongge's ownership regime. How does this football club make it happen? That's what we're about to discuss on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to the latest EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive. Thanks, by the way, to the Tilehurst End for their article from last season. Some excellent content up there on the Tilehurst End, specifically from Simeon Pickup. This is the EFL Debate. Get yourself subscribed on YouTube and on Spotify. For now, delighted to be joined. We will be joined in a moment by Greg Double, who's from the group Sell Before We Die. But for now, I'm delighted to welcome Chris Hartley to the podcast. Chris, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining me this evening. What's it going to take for change at Reading FC?
That's a big question. That is a really big question, Gabe. We don't know is the simple answer to that. As fans, we know that this club has been up for sale for the last 10 months. Mm-hmm. We've been repeatedly told that there is interested parties in buying this football club. Now, nothing has happened. We did have a statement from the club in March saying that there had been this exclusivity agreement made with an interested party. We believe that to be a Sheeran group. Now, that exclusivity period has been and gone, and we are no further down the line. Mm-hmm. And obviously, as we all know, the women's side has been the one that has been made to suffer.
Yeah.
Through this, with them being demoted.
That's another thing. Yeah. By the way, we should mention the women's team have been forced to withdraw from the Women's Championship, which again is an absolute disgrace. I probably should have mentioned that at the start because I think that's a really important issue.
Yeah, it's a disgraceful issue. Given that the women's team were relegated from the WSL 2 seasons ago, and were moved to a part-time model after the relegation of the men's team to League One last season. So we are no further down the line now than where we were in October, September last year. Mm-hmm. We were promised by Nigel Howe, who has been put in charge, so to speak, by Dai Yongge of finding potential buyers, that a deal would be hopefully concluded by May. We're now in July. Mm-hmm. It is not just frustrating for Reading fans. This is now 7 or 8 years of chaotic ownership under an owner who should never have been allowed to take over this football club in any way, shape, or form. It's on record what that means. He tried to buy Hull, or he was part of a group that tried to buy Hull back in 2016, I believe it was. But the Premier League had concerns about the group and denied them that opportunity to buy that club. Now, we were the unfortunate club that they then turned their guns on. And because we had an ownership group in the ties that were open to selling at the time and needed to sell at the time, he was able to gain access to this football club, and it has been downhill ever since. Ever since.
Yeah.
Apart from one season where we had a very young Michael Elise alongside Ovie Jari and John Swift running the show, and we unfortunately just finished outside the playoffs that season. But that has been a lone bright spot of Dai's ownership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Gabe.
Yeah, no. I think first of all, I don't know if it's possible to fiddle with your settings at all, because I did get a little bit of hiss back there. If not, no problem at all. But I wanted to come to in terms of interested buyers, because we know there needs to be change at Reading, Chris. But I guess the risk in these situations is that there's going to be interested buyers who try to have some dialogue with Dai Yongge and then end up not getting any sort of enough communication back to move things forward, and then they get up frustrated and end up getting frustrated and then give up. And I'm just wondering, are there people at the club who interested buyers might be able to talk to, do you think, that might be able to just keep their enthusiasm up a little bit, so that some sort of the club can make some sort of breakthrough to Dai Yongge in order to get a sale through?
That's, again, quite an interesting question. I'm sure Greg will be able to sort of talk to this more. Because obviously Sell Before We Die have a bit more of an in, so to speak. I mean, and obviously the Supporters Trust at Reading also have regular communication and regular dialogue with Nigel Howe. But as far as fans have been told, Nigel Howe is the man that is running this takeover process. Now, I'm sure not many of anyone would be aware that Nigel Howe is currently banned by the FA from football, which I find a bit disconcerting as a fan, because when John Medeski was running the club, he was the CEO, and we were very well run. He was managing a football club that was sustainable, that looked after its finances. So I don't know whether he was under Dai Yongge's instruction or anyone else's instruction when he broke the rules, because obviously the offence that he has been banned for by the FA came during that period. So as for whether there is someone at the club that can be talked to about a takeover bid and also has the ear of Dai Yongge, I don't know. This is the frustrating part, and as we've seen on multiple occasions, and especially over the case with the women's club, the level of communication that this football club has had since Dai Yongge has took over is negligible. They are essentially, whenever they are only communicating when they are forced to do so. Essentially, they are not communicating of their own free will. It feels like you could see that as a prime example of the communication with the women's side, where it was journalists, namely Tom Gary and James Earnshaw, who broke that news before even the club commented on it. Now, I don't know about you, but that's no way to run any business.
No.
So
No.
it doesn't give me hope that there is someone within that football club, as things stand, that has the ear of Dai Yongge. And that's concerning.
Yeah, very concerning. In terms of interest in the club, have we been able to get any understanding of consortiums that might be interested in Reading that are trying to acquire the club or the stake in the club?
Well, from what we understand, Leo Rifkind heads up a group called Chiron, and he was believed, and having done a bit of digging, fans do believe that his group was the group that had that exclusivity in March. It's also rumoured, obviously, that the ex-Wickham owner, Peter Cohig, is interested, although that would be quite interesting, given what happened in between Reading and Wickham, which is a shame because I don't think Reading fans have ever really borne any ill will towards Wickham until that point.
Well, in fact, do you know what? I think when Reading fans protested outside Adams Park, there were actually Wickham people, in Wickham scarves that were joining in the protest. So I
was part of that protest. I was a part of that protest that night.
Yeah.
So it is it is a bizarre situation that a man who has tried to essentially buy one of the biggest assets that our football club has, is now supposedly interested in buying our football club. There's also rumours to be, I don't know how much substance there is, but there's also rumours that Ziggy Wilf, who's the owner of the Minnesota Vikings and other, I believe, MLS franchises in the States, is interested.
Right.
Now, again, that's only rumour. I don't know if there's any substance in that. That's just been a constant rumour that keeps cropping up every so often, that they are interested. But that's the only two people that we know are the Cohig and Chiron, with Leo Rifkind. Those are the only two that are definitely on the table.
Those are the known quantities.
Yes, that's as far as we know. Now, Leo Rifkind, we know, was a former director at Charlton. So hopefully, should the bid from his group be successful, then I doubt he will have any issue with passing any fit and proper persons tests from the EFL. Okay. And I've actually just thought of one more, which is the Saudi group that's headed up by ex-QPR player Mark Bircham.
Right.
Again, these are all people that have appeared in the director's box at the SCL. So I can't get used to calling it the SCL. It's always going to be the Mdesi to me. But anyway, we've got to give Select Car Leasing their due. They've really, really bailed the club out when they've needed it.
Yeah.
So they have been in the director's box at the SCL on occasion. So there is interest, and there is genuine interest in this football club from multiple parties. So what is preventing Dai Yongge from selling is anyone's guess.
Yeah.
And that is a problem when you don't have communication, when you're hiding behind a lot of walls and things, is that no one knows what is going on. There is no open communication at all.
Yeah.
And I understand there are NDAs, and I understand all these other bits that go on, but there needs to be a lot more communication with Reading fans during the process.
Yeah, that's been a problem, Chris, for a long, long time. I wanted to bring in Greg Double from Sell Before We Die. Greg, good evening. How are you?
Hello, mate. You good?
Hi,
Yeah. Hi, Chris. How are you, mate? You all right?
I'm okay, mate. I'm okay.
Yeah. Chris, really absolutely loving your insights. The sound's coming off a little bit harsh. I'm just wondering if you can maybe
Okay.
switch to another device, possibly.
I can switch to my laptop if that helps, but
That would be
I'll go from there.
amazing. That would be amazing. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
I'll just
Greg,
switch now.
I wanted to come to you on this. We raised the question earlier, which is whether you think we've obviously discussed how Dai Yongge is not very. He's obviously not very good at communication, and that's a big problem when it comes to, I guess, owners who might, but prospective buyers who might be interested, and whether they might lose interest as a result of not getting much back. So I'm wondering if there are people, you think there's people at the club who they might be able to talk to as a way of at least getting some sort of momentum in terms of getting a sale through over the line.
So I think there's a couple of things at play there. I think I just caught the back end of Chris just before I joined on talking about NDAs, which do have some weight. So this is my personal view rather than talking on behalf of Sell Before We Die. I think something is close, and that's why the silence has completely gone. I think that's why the silence is more deafening than it has been in recent ways, because like there was a period where Nigel Howe was giving update. For context, Nigel Howe was the Reading. I think he's got the title of head of property, but it was also just one of Medeski's men who was considered quite trustworthy, but brought in previous bad owners, but was in charge of negotiating the sale. He was giving updates to the supporters trust that were at times frustrating, but they were talks. And look, these things take a long time. So it was. I think Star started feeling the pressure that they were giving updates that didn't say much, and Nigel's update. But now even that has dried up quite significantly because I think everyone is so NDA'd up to their eyeballs now that they can't talk. And the bit which in some ways is a good thing because it means that you're getting closer and that there is something to NDA, which I think is handy. But it's incredibly frustrating as a fan when you don't know what's going on. And I think like the problem we've got as a fan base is there are people that care about the club and are NDA'd up to their eyeballs and can't say anything. And then there's people who don't care about the club, which is like I haven't mentioned Dai Yongge's name at the moment because he, as far as I'm concerned, he's almost an irrelevance now in this process. Like we know what the price is. We know that there are people willing to pay it. We know that people are getting close and have been involved and are walking around the stadiums. Like I'm going to name Rob Cohig because I think he's been spotted at the stadium 2 or 3 times. If you've got money and you can be at Wickham, and you think you've got money to be at Reading, why on earth wouldn't you do it? And like he's been in and around the stadium before. We know with some of the training ground stuff that he knows, or at least he's got dialogue with the club, and he knows he's seen underneath the bonnet for a few things. I suspect he's coming in hot, either as part of a group or maybe even on his own, which would be interesting because, like you say, what you like about him as when cool heads prevailed about the whole Reading Wickham training ground fiasco, it's he's not done a bad job at Wickham.
Oh yeah,
no, very good job at Wickham.
They've been run well, and I'd slightly query a few things. So I'm less bothered about Dai Yongge now because I'm convinced he wants to sell. Like I'm fairly up because it's just like why wouldn't you? Like it's bleeding money. He's got cash flow issues out of the world. He's not making money here. Like, and there's the only way he makes money back is going through. Now, the other reason he's not because we're minutes away in terms of the grand scheme of things of calling in for administration and debtors calling in their debts. Creditors calling in their debts, and then he gets nothing. And then the only thing he could potentially be is become landlord via the ownership of the stadium and stuff like that. But if someone's willing to front you up 25 million versus £0, and he's all tied up in all sorts of legalese, from what I can understand in Hong Kong and China. So he's got cash flow liquidation problems. He wants to sell. Like that's the bit that I think my fellow Reading fans are a smidge hysterical on. Like I think he does want to sell. my focus now, or rather our focus is now, I want to have a look at what the potential owners are saying, and I think it starts off on a very, very weak footing if you are a prospective owner and you've not even had, I think, put it this way, we've had prospective owners who've come and gone, who've reached out to support to the supporters trust. I immediately prefer them to others just because I think they're willing to talk to the fans. I think that's I think that's what football's about, right? That hasn't happened with any of the groups that were previously linked. I think and look, if it does, I think that becomes a bit of a game changer because, like, look, we've just lost a women's team. I can't believe that that's just a current owner decision, because if you're close to a sale, if you're that close to the sale, and as we suspect, or as it's been reported, that it's potential owners loaning money to the club, not coming out of Dai Yongge's pocket anymore to keep the lights on. I suspect that I'm speculating a little bit here, but I suspect that the decision to disband the women's team wasn't just a Dai Yongge issue. I suspect that was also something that had been discussed at the negotiation table, and people have made a decision on it. I can't believe it just came to the end of this week. It was like, oh shit, the women's team might be gone. Like, I just don't believe that's how it's played out. Do you know what I mean? So it's like so I'm less bothered about Dai Yongge and his bunch of crony like numpties that have run this club. I'm now more interested in potential owners and the people who've been giving the club money to keep the lights on. What's their game? What thing? And like, you've got to be reaching out to the fans at this point. And if it is Koenig, he should learn some lessons from what happened with the training ground, where if he'd communicated that effectively, i.e. what the plan was going to be, or like if there was when he tried to make out that he was actually doing the club a favour by buying the training ground, I'm like, okay, then, well, let's hear it. Like, what was your plan? Were we gonna training ground share with Wickham? Like, a lot of people would have been up for it, because he tried to do it all cloak and daggers. That's when you got the visceral fan reaction. Like, he'll admit himself, I think he did. In fact, he did so on a Wickham podcast, that he hoisted himself by his own petard a little bit in terms of the fan reaction, because he didn't communicate, and that's another issue caused by poor communication. So look, if in the unlikely event a potential owner is listening to us, it's like, start communicating, because you've got a fan base that are pretty well versed in what we can and can't do. Like the training ground stuff, like, we had 3 property lawyers on that straight away to find a link to go through we mobilized 200 fans to be outside Wickham on Saturday. Like, Reading fans aren't here to have the piss taken out of them anymore. And it's like, I've joked about this before, about us being El Middle Classico when we play Fulham, and like, it's like, we're not mugs anymore. Like, you've got a really intellectualized, informed fan base who've been going to government meetings, who've been informing on new political bills. Don't mug us off, because like, we're pretty good at this now. And so it's just speak to us. And it's like, look, you know what the worst thing is about the women's team thing? Even if someone had come out and just said, like, look, even on a new owner bit had come out and said, like, look, because Dai Yongge has run this club into the ground, we literally cannot afford to commit to the WSL standards, the NUCO standards that are needed for the women's team. We just can't do it yet. But we've got a 5-year plan to grow the women's team, and like, I think people would have listened, and I think they would have heard it. And I think, look, I'm upset about the women's team, because my sisters play football, and like, they've played to a higher standard, and I'm upset about. But I'm being hypocritical, because I didn't go to many games. I think I've been to 1 or 2, and so there's a little bit of hypocrisy where you're like, well, hang on a minute. In my heart of hearts, I haven't supported them as I should have done, but I've always liked that there are, for example, there are fans who are fans of Reading Women and not Reading Football Club in terms of the men's team, and they've lost their team. And I don't care if that's 10 or 100, that is not good. And as a progressive family club, it is not good that we've lost our women's team. Like, there is no, I see no positive in that. But again, it's just, if the potential owners have made the decision to cut it, you've got a pretty good out, which is Dai Yongge has literally run the club into the ground so that we can barely. Well, there's a great story that we couldn't afford defibrillators. Like, so there's a stretch that we might not be able to afford the women's team. I think people would understand that, because it's all done so cloak and daggers. It just feels horrible.
And
sorry,
Greg,
can I?
Sorry, Greg, can I just come in on that? My hope is that with the women's team, once the club is restabilized, I wonder if they've kept it in level 5 because they hope that once the situation is stabilized, that they might be able to reinvest in it and sort of get it back off the ground. I think that's what I'm hoping and what I'm reading, in that it hasn't gone completely. It's at an amateur level, but it could be a case of once everything is back to where it should be, and all at the end of the day, all Reading fans want is a club that's just run properly. We're not asking for multi-billionaire that's going to come in and inject so much cash that we're Man City. We're asking for a well-run club that can restabilize, refloat, and then build again towards getting back into the Championship. So my hope is that maybe once we are back in that position, that we will see reinvestment back into the women's side.
No, it's a shame because I think look, I put it this way: it's not implausible. The reason it's not implausible is because we've got through years of having done women's football really well. Like, that's the other thing that I get really upset about is Reading were ahead of their time massively on women's football. Like something Medeski was really in a way that was almost surprisingly, given how old school John Medeski is, that he was such a backer of it. But we were miles ahead of the game on it. Like, for ages, sorry, I'm out of turn my WhatsApp's off and shut it. For ages we were miles ahead of the game on it, and because of that, like our foundation, our academy levels, our sort of our grassroots in the area, I reckon our foundations at a community level are pretty good. And there's the Reading FC Foundation, which I think does a lot of good work in this respect. And so I think, put it this way, there is the environment. We're not completely scorched earth. I think there is enough there that you could build back on. And look, I think we'd be quite progressive, and like you'd hope that there's a route to the top. But we're not the only. The bit where I've got a little bit of sympathy with the club, and it's like we're not the only team that's going to get priced out of women's football if you tie it so closely to the men's financial performance and the team going through. So it does seem to be the way the new co seems to be set up. It does seem to favour Premier League sides developing Premier League women's teams, and I'm not entirely sure that's the look. And as I said, I'm into women's football because of my sisters. It's like I don't think I want to see the game grow. I'm not convinced that's the right way to do it. Like, and there's a really good example with the London City Lionesses, which for all intents and purposes is Millwall. And they've just been bought by a private equity women's backer who's big into women's sport and is going at it from a hedge fund point of view. But they kept the Millwall Lionesses structure and foundation, which is obviously very, very good because they've been around for ages and they've got South East London really locked. And I don't think I'd have said this 10, 15 years ago, but Millwall are a pretty good family club now in terms of assets coming through. The work they've done in the community is fairly
fantastic,
And so a private owner's come in and basically looking to take them to the next level with truthfully, what's a better brand name, right? It's like as you're coming through, and it seems to me that almost happened with us. That there was a separate group interested in the women's football, and it got blocked by potential owners and perhaps a little bit of the FA, which I think. Look, that's the big news from this story, but it's sad. I think Chris is right. I think we've got the foundations to go up. I think one thing that I would quite like to see us do is turn up big for one of the women's games in the 5th tier and just show that they haven't been forgotten by the wider club. And perhaps you get a little bit of that don't know what it's got till it's gone bit where you do show up and we can give them a really big crowd in the 5th tier. And I think that would be nice.
I went to the Birmingham Reading game at the Medeski. Sorry, I called it the Medeski. It's a habit. A few months ago, and there was about 1,500 fans there. You know, like it was well supported for a side that was struggling at the bottom of the WSL Championship, and I got absolutely pounded that night by a pretty decent Birmingham side. But the support is there. It's just kind of, and I think this goes for the wider club, is that what I can't understand about this situation is everything is in place for someone just to come in. You've got a stadium there you don't need to build. You've got one of the best training grounds in this country. I mean, If you've got Charlie Savage, who played for one of the biggest clubs in the world, saying that Reading's training ground is on par with Manchester United's, then you're doing something right.
Because another declining club with terrible training facilities.
Oh,
but
yeah, I mean, like, you only have to hear what's going on with the women's team there, at Man United currently, to sort of see. But everything is in place. You don't need to kind of put infrastructure investment into the side. You just need to invest in the playing squad, to all intents and purposes. You've got everything in place.
I think you've got, to an extent, yes. I think you've got everything in place for a Championship Premier League club. The problem is we're a League One club
at the moment.
Yeah, and so I think my argument would be, like, so I can understand perspective owners. For example, I've got, like, I can do this without naming and shaming him, but I've got a mate who is involved in football club buying and head runner who's been fantastically helpful to us throughout this process, because he can explain, like, the market. And he just said, he goes, like, look, for the price your owner is asking, you can buy Championship football clubs. And for the price and not just Championship football clubs, Italian clubs in Serie A, French clubs that you go in. So you've got this thing where you go, oh, yeah, we're a great offer. Yeah, but you forget that every other football club's for sale. And if you could get maybe Europa League in one season or 2 good seasons, whereas, like, Reading need to do an Ipswich to get to Premier League. That's why we're still just about attractive, is that you do see a 2-division bounce quite a lot. That happens a lot. You've seen it with Leeds did it, Norwich did it, Leicester did it, Ipswich have done it really recently. So as a League One club, I think there's still that you've got the promised land draw to the Premier League. The issue we've got, again, because we've been so horrifically badly run, is that the club still, like, is nowhere near making a profit. It's still expensive. I still think, and so I think you've got everything in place, but without the revenue.
Yeah. Well, Greg, let's dive in. You say everything in place. Let's define everything in a way, because it's like you've got the training grounds there. That's great. The stadium's there. That's great. So I appreciate that you got those 2 things. Absolutely tick. But as a structural entity, would you say everything's in place?
So yeah, I suppose. Like, look. So let's go through what we've got. Right.
Okay.
We've got stadium, tick, as long as that gets bought and created. Elite level training ground, tick, going through. The academy that's Cat 1, which I think will be the next casualty of cuts, new owner or not, I don't think we'll be able to maintain Category A. And also there's some weird FA rule, which if you lose it twice, you can't get it back.
Oh, you're joking.
Yeah, and so we've got it and we've lost it once, which when we managed to get it back, and then I think that's a typical rule that favours guess who versus favours clubs like us, right? So I think that'll be the next thing to go. But the academy is ridiculously well thought of. Like, it's every season.
The same in Doolin with the work that
It's like every season a 14-year-old gets pinched by Man City. Like, I think we had a 12-year-old this time, and the youth team has basically become basically last season became our first team, right? And and they've grown and developed really well.
Greg, just on that, do you know if the club does well at getting percentage sell-ons for the sales?
So well, we've currently got an FA charge for negotiating one. Nigel Howe's about to be banned for football for 6 months or however long.
Because for getting some money for players that other clubs want to buy.
Read the thing. It's the FA report. So it's on Michael Elise.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it is fantastic.
So how on earth can you be sanctioned against for negotiating?
When you look at it, mate, like it's just all been a bit backdoored with his agent, and like it's on the FA website. I won't bore you with like the thing, but it just. Not everyone acted entirely cleverly, I think, is the best way of putting it.
And Michael Jokes, who's the academy manager, was also caught up in that. I think he got a fine, rather than a ban. But it was, I mean, with the rumour that Elise's off to Bayern soon, that will be much needed cash coming into the club.
What's the percentage you got for Elise? So
we think it's 10%, isn't it?
Yeah, 10%, and he's going for...
It's 10 on profit, so it's £8 million minus 60. Like, if it goes, and I think what's his other release? Is it 40 or 60? But it's basically
it's about 50, 55.
Yeah, so we'll get it's 55 minus 8, say. and then
47.
10% of that, so 4.7.
4. I
Yeah.
see. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
So
4.7
that's much
million.
needed money coming into the club, regardless of.
So that keeps the light on just on its own, like tax deductible for let's say 2-3 months.
Okay.
Like, which I think is weird. But historically, and guess who, under Dai Yongge, we've been awful at it. So Nelson Abbey's gone for peanuts to Forest and Olympiacos. It's
but Greg, can I ask a question on this? When it comes to selling these players, it's one thing selling them for peanuts, which I agree is really bad management. Are you able to get some decent? Do you know if you're able to get some decent sell-on percentages so that if they make the next big move, then you at least get?
Honestly, I'm not sure, but I'm going to go with no because especially especially in the last year or so, it's like we were selling players to make ends meet. So our negotiation points are pretty low, right? Look, I'm speculating on this a bit. It's just like, oh, can we have a hefty sell-on clause? It's like, no, we're keeping your lights on for a month, which is how I would talk it.
Right.
It's like Tom McIntyre was out of contract, so we sold him to Portsmouth for 75 grand.
Oh, didn't Omar Richards go on a free as well?
I was going to say Omar. I was going to come in with Omar Richards.
He left on a free, but this
again,
is the thing. This is
Danny
the
Loader was another one. Loader was another one who, I believe Wolves were interested in him, and they were offering $1.5 million. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it was money, and we lost him on a free, and we didn't get. And like with Omar Richards, we didn't get any compensation because he moved to Porto.
I mean, Chris, Greg, I mean, that feels like a massive thing for the next owner to get it right when it comes to selling at the right price.
Yeah, or just selling or renewing contracts. It's like, look, I'll give you my greatest. I'll call it the greatest shit in terms of like Young's like back catalogue. We turned down 10 million for Liam Moore because rumors that he was Dai Yongge's lucky player. He was so lucky. He broke his ankle, shoulder, knee, shins, everything went. And so, and he was on 38 grand a week. So in the championship, we had a player that didn't play for nearly 2 years. Almost immediately after we paid him almost immediately after we turned down 10 mil from Brighton and gave him a 5-year contract. And so that Sports Sonny Aluko.
We were handing out 5-year contracts like they were going out of fashion at that point.
You just go back.
Like
John Swift on a free.
John Swift and Yaku Mate
on a free. Lucas Zhao on a free. So you've got all of these players where because Dai Yongge basically lost interest and ran out of money, they were players who were just like who were happy to pick up their wages and not be sold. And we were like it's like not selling Lucas Zhao in the championship cost us 6 points, relegated us. Because part of the rules to stick to the business plan was we had to, which was set by the EFL about 5 years too late, was that we had to raise a certain amount of money in player sales.
And also, do you know what, Greg? I also think that selling players when they're at their peak helps because if you don't, there's a kind of a stagnation. It's like, oh, I'm just might as well leave at the end of the contract. Rather than I might get a massive move if I continue to play like this, and then the next player comes in and says he got a massive move. So
I wonder if Chris saw this as well. But there's a great podcast have you seen it? Was it called Under the Kosh podcast, which is occasionally brilliant, occasionally like just a bit too bait for me. But
I do sometimes think, though, on a side note with Under the Kosh, I feel kind of bad for the people that they're having a go at that they don't get to say their side of the story.
Come back on, right? Yeah. So they did a great one with Matt Mills, who was a little bit of a love-hate character here, like great player, but like he once gave the finger to the fans, and I don't think everyone forgave him. Like I must admit, I wasn't that bothered about it, but it was like he told a great story where he didn't want to leave Reading, but John Medeski had a rule that you sell a player a year to pay for the season, basically. And there was a big, who was it?
Oh, Leicester. Did you go to Leicester?
It was Leicester, Leicester came in from.
But he was the player that got sold and he was off. And the season before that, it was Gylfi Sigurdsson. Season before that, it would have been Shane Long. Yeah, and that's how.
And Kevin Doyle before that.
Yeah, and that's how you run a football club. Like, since then, we've not been a selling club when we absolutely should have been a selling. Like, Nelson Abbey should have gone for like mils, but because we didn't put him on a contract, he's gone for tuppence. And you're going through. So again, like, look, this is boring chat because we've had it before, but you don't need to tell you that Dai Yongge isn't very good at running a football club.
Greg, can we sort of look at it? Like, if we were to look at the positive aspect, not of Dai Yongge's,
Good luck.
not going there. I've not gone mad. If we were to frame it positively, sort of moving forward under the next owner, hopefully that's comes in soon. You've got a great academy, so if you can start getting the right fees for players, that could be massive in terms of long-term development.
Yeah, of course, as long as you back it up with contracts, right? And so if you come in, and so like, look, I think it's madness in League One if you're not looking to play kids with the hope that 1 or 2 a season do something really impressive. Like, if we'd had the season we had last season with the kids that were playing in under a normal ownership structure, I think 2 would have been sold for good big money in January, or they would have been put on longer contracts with a view of being sold the next season, right? So yes, there is hope that will happen as long as the academy doesn't get downsized and graded to such an extent. So I think there's a balance to be had. Like, again, with my most pragmatic hat on, do I think a Category A academy in League One is financially prudent? Probably not. I think you probably could have a Cat B or Cat C downgrade, which is basically...
but for the long term, you've got to have Category 1.
Yeah, like, but do you know how expensive that is? That's like £5-6 million a year. Which
is that expensive?
Yeah, like if it requires a coaching, it requires the amount of coaching going. So there was an argument from a pragmatic point of view, again, which I would hate that you downgrade it. So you still get enough quality. So you get the balance right between downgrading it a bit, but still being able to produce enough quality to go
to
through.
Be fair, $6 million a year on an academy is a lot of money.
It's a lot, and also, I mean, we're the only League One side with it, right, Chris?
Yeah, I believe so. And I think one thing I would add as well, Greg, to that is improving our scouting. I mean, look at what we did with Kevin Doyle, Shane Long back in the day.
Yeah.
In Ireland.
Also, other players that we developed that have brought up. I mean, I think Femi Aziz it could be another example of that in terms of he came up through non-league. He kind of bounced around, academy after academy, ended up in non-league, and now he's not the most consistent of players, but he is a player on his day that can do damage and can create. And now I think our scouting team, if we do lose the academy, needs to be invested in, because that is something that we had an edge on.
Any idea who you've got at the moment, Chris?
No, he's quite.
We're literally the only. It's the only 2 teams in the EFL who haven't made a signing this season, or us and Morecambe.
Yeah,
you had Jared Buckland, but he went to Stoke, didn't he?
Yes, so yeah, got him over here, and then look, Mark Bowen's there as director of football operations, who's there,
and Lewis Carey as well. I think isn't it? He's still there.
Is it Lewis Carey? Mark Carey?
Yeah, Lewis Carey.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've got, like, again, like, there was a period where everyone was willing to give Dai Yongge a second bite of the cherry, was when it looked like we were doing grown-up stuff on the scouting team, and then straight away, the moment like it switched off again, the scouts left, and so it was like there was this brief honeymoon period where it looked like he was going to restructure the club to look like something remotely sensible, and Mark Bowen came out with this now, I say famous quote, it's famous in Reading, it says, "Oh, we've had the last of our medicine." And it was just sort of like, I think it was 4 weeks later, we got a 6-point deduction. It was just like, there's the medicine again.
Wasn't that a talk of blue collar that he gave?
Yeah,
I remember rightly.
Yeah, and it was just like so. Yeah, I think Chris is right. Like, look, if we could go back to what was proudly called the Reading Way, which was basically Brian McDermott going around island, like having a good time picking out players, and like we did it like really well. Like the only thing, again, I've just got to be a bit careful because like, look, Reading's best ever team was 20 years ago now, which like blows my mind coming from
0506, yeah.
And like
that was a quality side, by the way. Sonko at centre half,
yeah,
Hanneman
like,
in goal.
Ingmarsson, yeah.
Very, 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 very strictly the best championship side of all time, and no one will beat it.
I think it was Wolves 17-18.
It was not. It was 106 points for Reading, and
two losses on the season.
Two losses in the season,
overall, including cup.
It's like this might be online, but I can still punch you. Like,
and Wolves had the bankrolling of a Chinese conglomerate behind them as well.
But like they had Rubén Sellés on the pitch. Like, I mean, Rubén Sellés, who was like a champion.
And we had Steve Sidwell. I'd take Sidwell.
I think Rubén Sellés might be slightly better than.
It would have been marked
It was an incredible team. Like, absolutely.
Sonko would have booted him in the air in the first 5 minutes. He would have wanted no part of it, and it would be cry off. Nicky Shorey, England left back Nicky Shorey would have pocketed it
again. Another one that was
Graham Murphy as well, right?
£25,000 from Leighton Orient.
This is the thing. But when you go through this team, it's like what's quite funny is a couple of players weren't inexpensive. So Leroy Lita was £1 million, which back then was like hella money. But that was our big signing.
Was Leroy Lita even? I know you had Kevin Doyle in the 0506
season. So the four were Doyle
and Kitson.
Yeah, it was Lita, Kitson, Doyle, Long, and really it was Kitson, Doyle, and Lita used to rotate basically.
Yeah, you got Long, Kitson from Cambridge, didn't you? I think.
Yeah,
and Long was like he was a superstar, but I think his biggest moment that season was the Derby goal where it was last minute. He got the equaliser away at Derby when the record. It was New Year's Eve. The record was about to, we're about to be beaten by Derby.
Who was it you beat 6-0 in like April to confirm going
up? It was Derby.
5-0, and that was Derby, wasn't it? We absolutely
Derby.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and we beat Cardiff as well. We beat Cardiff 5-1 as well the week after, I think.
Oh no, that's 5-2, wasn't it? Oh, was it 5-1?
5-2, yeah.
Oh yeah. But I remember the funniest thing about that was I was 18 and I just discovered betting apps. Well, not betting apps, betting. And I had James Harper first goal, Reading to win 4-0. And James Harper scored first. And so when John Oster scored the 5th, I was absolutely fucking furious. And so like the only one.
James Harper, what a player he was. And
still going for the league, specialist, wasn't he?
Yeah. This is what happens, Gab. If you get Reading fans talking about when we were good, we'll stay there forever.
Yeah. I mean, I did make a mad comment once that I think the 11-12 season, because of the chase and the chase down of both Southampton and West Ham, was a little bit better, because of the difficulty, and we kind of came from nowhere. We were beating playoff finalists the previous season.
Didn't you have an FA that season as well, Chris?
Yeah,
that was later.
Later?
Yeah, that was the funny thing about. I don't actually disagree with Chris. There was it was basically that they're the two teams, right, that you look back on and you idolize. And 2011 and 12 were a proper sum of their parts team. I actually look back on 2005, 2006. All of those players were had Premier League careers.
Yeah, well, what I would say, Greg, is I imagine the 0506 team is remembered a bit more strongly, partly because of the points record, but also because the following season you finished 9th in the Premier League. You missed out on Europe on the final day. I think you might have drawn or lost at Blackburn or something.
Drew to Blackburn.
Yeah, but after that, in 06-07, everyone was saying for a newly promoted side, could you do a Reading? Like that was an expression that was used. Whereas I think the 11-12 side, you went up, but then you didn't invest at all in the Premier League.
Well,
didn't win a game.
I always think of this as the start of the decline, because Medeski, obviously, he knew he didn't have the money to be able to maintain the club, as it was. And obviously we had Anton Zingarovic and Chris Samuelson come into the club. And it turned out Anton Zingarevic was basically playing with daddy's money, because obviously Boris Zingarevic is an oligarch in Russia. I think he was it, am I correct in thinking, Greg, he was a paper pulper or something like that?
It was so annoying with Anton Zingarevic, because it was on paper it was
he was perfect.
Like, so he was a Russian billionaire, less perfect, but Russian billionaires were cool at this point. Like, we had
but he also had links to the town as well.
Like, yeah, he'd gone to was it Bearwood or Bullmarsh? Like, he'd gone to a school
Bearwood College.
Like yeah. He'd gone to Bearwood College.
The irony, we're now training at Bearwood. But,
yeah, so he was on paper absolutely brilliant. And like, if I don't wake up tomorrow morning, it's because of what I'm about to just say. But like, I think his dad had links to the Russian mafia.
Potentially, I mean,
it was all and it all got a bit. I'll be careful drinking my tea later, but it was like it all got a bit. Al Jazeera did an expose on it, and it was just like, oh wow, it was like I think we just basically Reading was a big washing machine at that point, and then it just sort of stopped, and then irony upon irony. So the potted history of owners was like, so Zingarevic was like, it looked ever so exciting, and and we got up that season. Like, without spending a lot of money, we did some savvy things. Like, we got Jason Roberts January, and we were all right. And it was just, I remember, and then the ties took over, and I actually now look at them like a little bit more negatively than I did at the time, because they basically were slightly asset stripping. Like, they were very interested on it from a property point of view. One of them still owns the hotel that's attached to the stadium, which is another complexity that comes into the deal, because
I think also he's still got like a minimal like percentage of the club, so I think it's like I think it's negligible. It's like 2% or 1%.
I mean, I think the ties did a lot of damage to Reading, mainly because of they call us the Royals. But no, I've really. Sorry, go on.
I love that song. Like, when when you're just out there, like when something is so terrible, you just like. I remember my WhatsApps just popping off when that landed.
Lady Sassama, yeah.
And they call us the Royals.
You know what the worst thing was? It's like every clip they used of Reading, the stadium looked empty, and I was just like, no, hang on, we were having good stadiums here. It's like even in the video, it made Reading look tin pot, and so I was just there, like, got to the point where I was actually quite enjoying it. But apparently, she was like genuinely mortified by the fan reaction, and that like really upset me, because I was like, oh, she really wanted that.
The thing is, at least that was communication, which we aren't even having now. It was a bit of fun where actually she was trying to big up something that she owned, right? I mean, owners do stupid things, but if you're going to do a stupid thing by producing a song about a football club that you own, that's okay. Like, looking back.
Listen, guys, I've really enjoyed this this little tangent, but I would like us to get back
No. Let's stay back when it was fun.
Let's say when we were good. I mean, like,
Dave,
we could go back with Birmingham as well when they were good.
The Alan Pardew days in the early 90s now, aren't you?
Oh, go.
Okay. So where am I? Let's have a quick look at the squad, because we've talked a lot about the off-field situation.
It hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't changed. No.
I think Dean Pizanis had made an appearance today. He was pictured, the Australian goalkeeper who ended up at Sutton United last season on loan. So he's back in the squad, although I don't think he's going to be anywhere near it, to be honest.
No, well, that's one thing I wanted to come on to, Chris, because I've got 5 goalkeepers written down. You got Joel Pereira, you got Jokel Andres and Bizanis, who you mentioned. Now, Conor Boyce-Clarke was someone who I know 3 or 4 years ago was talked about as one of the most exciting young goalkeepers in the country of his age.
He still is. I mean, the games he has played in, he has played pretty well. I mean, Noel Hunt gave him his full professional debut the last day of the season when we were relegated already against Huddersfield. And since then, he's been a cup goalkeeper, but he hasn't really put a foot wrong. Would you agree, Greg, with that?
Yeah, he'll be strongly number 2, I suspect, behind Joel Pereira. Like Joel Pereira got the gloves off. What's his name? David Button. Which I reckon, being cruel, I reckon we might have been 5 places higher up the league if that change had happened earlier. Because
Button he's on his last legs, I think. David Button.
Yeah, this is my big criticism of Luke Southwood, who we had before that, who went Cheltenham. I think he's gone Birmingham now.
No, he's at Bolton.
Bolton, that's it. And goalkeepers are allowed to make mistakes. They're not allowed to cost you points. And Button was costing us games, and that happened with Southwood a couple of times. And I think that's it. You go. Whereas Joel Pereira's clanger was last season was when we were 3-2 up, 3-1 up, and we made it 3-2. You allowed those clangers, but so I think he'll be there. I think Boyce will be number 2. I think Andreasen has been around for ages and not really broken through. Like he seems to be perennially on loan at Yeovil.
I don't think he even got much playing time at Carlisle last season either.
Yeah, so I think he's cooked. And Dean Bazanis was looked appalling for Sutton. I think didn't they get turned 9-0 or something like that? And
at some point, at some point he was. I mean, he got a few emergency appearances in the relegation season. I mean, famously he was in goal against Hull when we won our last away game until we beat Wickham. He was in goal that day. But yeah, he was always brought as a number 2 goalkeeper, but yeah, he was never good enough to be number 1.
Probably going to be number 5.
So apparently the story is he was very good mates with Tom Ince, and so Paul Ince brought him in as a little.
What an excellent recruitment strategy that is.
And it was just like that was the thing where they got on really well. Like it was obviously a bit like because
Greg, are you making all your structural decisions? You're making all your structural decisions based on relationship to Tom Ince.
That's what happens.
Paul Ince got appointed just after we signed Tom Ince on loan. So there you go.
In the middle there somewhere is Keir Sheehan again. So that little lech was there again. But
if there's ever one man that needed to be banned from being in football after the scandal around Tevez and Mascherano, that he is the man.
That was really funny because remember Paul Ince brought him on we were 4-0 down to United or something, and Paul Ince brought him on because he was a big United fan. So he did a keeper sub so Dean Bazanis could play at Old Trafford and say that he'd played at Old Trafford.
Yeah,
which was kind of cute in a way.
But then also Reading aren't a charity that give.
Yeah, it was cute in a Sunday League under 7s sort of.
I mean, that was also the day that Andy Carroll decided to try and take out the whole Man United side.
Well, he ruined Ericsson's season, didn't he? Which was really funny.
Yeah.
So I suspect, Gabs, I can do you our 1 to 11 for next season, I reckon.
Please do. Yes, I'd like that.
Yeah.
So right back currently don't have one.
Kelvin on the new 3-year deal.
No. So I'm actually going to be a hipster on this. I think Kelvin Abrifa is going to break through this season. So,
he was very good at the back end of last season. I mean, he got such a cheer for a tackle that.
Yeah, it was a celebration.
You don't normally see it at football grounds.
It was a really spotted celebration tackle, wasn't it? Where you're just there
it was a robust, it was more than a robust tackle. Let's put it that way. But he's very good. Very quick.
So right back, we're actually quite well stacked. I think Yeardom and Abrifa. I think Yeardom, as long as he hasn't declined too sharply, is still a perfectly fine League One right back. Abrifa is the one with the higher ceiling, I think. Mm-hmm. Left back, it's left back. I had it where we literally don't have.
Greg, could you just expand on that, on why you see the potential in Kelvin Abrifa?
Mate, he just looks very, very good. He pocket rocket right back. He got a bit. I think he could have broken through a season or two earlier, but he got a really bad injury. Just looks very, very complete. Looks good going forward. Seems to have got a bit of whip on him. Chris said, throws himself into a tackle.
And also the other thing is, when he got back from injury, Rubén Sellés basically brought him into the squad as soon as he was back fit. I mean, he was on the bench quite a bit and then got minutes steadily as the season progressed.
Yeah.
He's a very nice kid as well. I mean, apparently the rumor was that other clubs wanted him. His contract was up this summer, but we managed to get him on a new 2-year deal. I mean, which is something. I'm really pleased that we've managed to secure him for 2 years. Given that Yeardom's contract is up now at the end of this coming season.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I'll give if I just to show that I've got a bit of balance. If you just slag off potential owners for letting the women's team go, you might have to give potential owners a bit of credit for releasing some money to get a Brave for lockdown. Because I think if he has a good season, like we might be able to get some money for him, or he's good enough to take us up a division. Left back, we literally don't have one.
I think Gerald Dorset played there.
I had Gerald Dawson.
Oh shit!
He's more of a centre back who's being played out of position.
Yeah. He's centre back coming through.
Yeah. Again, he's another one from the academy who's kind of took his time in getting through into the first team. Again, in the games he's played, he's looked decent. Like he's not made the mistake. And actually, when he came into the side, over Nesta Guinness-Walker and whoever else we were playing at left back,
Austin, wasn't it? Like basically, I think the best way of describing it, he's a centre back playing left back.
Yeah,
but we were much more solid when he came into that team. Much more solid.
I mean, you've retained John Clark and John Ryan from the under-21s. I don't know if anyone's got any idea.
Yeah, I went to the under-21 game where they played Forest in the Premier League 2 playoffs, and John Ryan was actually playing right back that day, and John Clark was playing midfield. He was playing attacking left midfield. Because John Clark, he's just left to go to Grimsby. I can't remember his name, but he was playing at the left back, and I'm disappointed we actually lost him because again he's got a good, defensively he was a bit weak at times, but he reminded me a little bit of Shorey in the respect of a wand of a left foot that boy had. And I think he's going to get on very well at Grimsby. Grimsby have really got a player on their hands.
Right, that's exciting.
If you merged Matty Carson with
that's it, with John Clark.
If you merged Carson with Dorset, you'd have a good left back. But it's basically Carson couldn't defend, and Dorset's not great going forward. But Carson was getting targeted as well, though. Like you saw that a couple of times.
Can I ask you though, Greg, with the way that Rubén Sellés likes to play, I get the impression that he's of the sort of Southampton school where you press narrowly so your wide men sort of join in with the attack and try and press, which would suggest to me that you need your fullbacks to try and provide a bit of width.
Well, this is it. So I said it, funny enough, this is one of my favourite arguments I have with Sim on the tie left end, which is
I love Sim. He's great.
Yeah, in the first set, especially when we were playing what was basically a 4-2-4, fullbacks are important to the Sellés system, and fullbacks were our weakest position when he was trying to play it. And so you got to put it, when we went more to the 4-4-1-1, it takes a little bit of heat off the fullbacks to go forward, because it was, as you said, but we were pressing quite centrally, but we're pressing high up the pitch. The people who won the ball were Aziz. The thing that he doesn't get enough credit for is Aziz won a lot of ball. And on the other side, left wing was a problem, but like left wing again, it's sort of like no one made it their own last season, but we were winning when we were playing well. We were winning the ball off people's fullbacks and stuff. So it was actually
Kamara I think Kamara was the great hope there. And again, he's still young. He has his contract, I believe, was rolled over for the season, this coming season. So hopefully he's now back and he can make an impact, because that guy's
well, Chris, I saw that on the stats that he didn't play at all on the left wing last season and only played on the right. So is he a left-sided player by trade?
So he's left-footed.
He's left-footed, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit. It's like, if you want me to get a bit Brexity and gammon, like,
please get Brexity and gammon.
In the old days, it would have been getting to the byline and like crossing the ball in, rather than being a cutback winger sort of thing. But everyone seems to think that inverted
an inside left, an inside right, cutting in on your left, and I am Robin if you want.
So we've played inverted. I say we've played inverted wingers. It's like Femi Aziz is left-footed and plays on the right. We had it sort of going through. So I think look, I've not seen enough of Cameron, but when we see him, he's good. Like, I think he thinks he's a number 10, but he's not getting that role for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Elliott got better. Actually, you know what? Let's do it properly. So we've got right back and left back. So I think left back would be a priority signing area.
If we can sign a player, that is.
Yeah, unless you're going to. So Sellés, I think that's probably a priority signing area, or it's trust one of Ryan or Clark to come through. And
I think if there's money to sign players, then you try and get yourself a left back in and move Dorset in.
Even if it's a left back that you can kind of utilize an experienced left back while you have one or Clark or Ryan developing beneath him.
Like, of yesteryear signings, it's like, again, this is something.
It's Matthew Robertson. When you had Nicky Shorey in the background.
Yes, I was going to go with Ian Hart, but I like the Matty Robinson one. But it's that you'd quite like to have a player like that to help the other ones come through. But let's say that's priority. Centre back, I think at the moment is quite easy. It's Bindon and Benge, and I think that will probably be the two that start the season.
The only problem is there's no depth whatsoever.
Can we zoom in on Tyler Bindon, because he was talked about as a really exciting prospect last season?
Yeah, like, what's funny about him was, so as I understand it from like a mate at the club, like, he was basically bought as a bit of a long shot. Let's see if he's got anything, we might be able to sell him on for a bit. Like, there wasn't like ridiculously high hopes, but he just came in and was like, and he just looked. So risk for him still. Like, I basically said, if he spends all of his preseason in the gym, we're going to have a serious player there, because he's still like, I mean, he's only 18, but like, there was a couple of times where big League One strikers could knock him off the ball and like put him on. I actually think if we can get into the Championship, I think he might look like a better player in the Championship. He's so composed on the ball, like proper. I always like, again, getting a bit Brexity gammon on it. I like my centre backs to win headers, and he's not the best in the air. But his ground defending is superb, and he's comfortable on the ball. And I think Mbenge, who again, for ages, like, we're still not quite sure what his best position is. I think it is now centre back, he was just a heart of the team towards the back end.
He was brought in originally as a defensive midfielder, I believe, and then he was played emergency at right back when Yedom was injured the season we went down. And again, this is how bad things were. When he first came in, he was only on a 6-month deal or 3-month deal, and that got extended. But he's really surprised me. But he is, again, like Greg said, he's the life and soul. He is that jovial character who really, really cares. But the problem is he does have a mistake in him. He is that headed kick it defender that you do need, especially.
I really like, and like, not just like, obviously, like, he's the first centre back I've loved like that since like Sonko, in terms of it just like big dog tackles. Like, do you think
that's quite an exciting partnership then? Because you've got the talents of Tyler Bindon, and then you got the physicality of Cheek and Beng.
It's really on point. Like,
it's coming back to what the legendary Steve Couple talked about, is a blend. You need a blend at centre back. You need players who are going to complement each other, rather than you have two stoppers. You need players who are going to work together well, because they cover each other's weaknesses.
Yeah.
Now, my thing with Mbenge as well, Chris is right. Like, at the start, he had a thing, but the more he played at centre back, the less those mistakes started happening. And like, he was. And I just think the more that stays settled, the better we'll be. Like, there were times when I thought, like, bloody hell, he looks a bit too good for this division, and then he has a clanger, and you're like, And that's why you're here. And it's
I mean,
the thing,
Bolton last season away, in particular, was one of those moments where he dived in when he didn't need to, made a foul that led to a Bolton penalty and putting us 2-0 down in the game, or 2-1 down at the time.
Yes, that's right. So
killed the game.
He's right, but I reckon give him a bit more time at centre, because bear in mind, like, we're still not a ton. I think he'll be fine. Right midfield is really easy. It's going to be Aziz. Like, Sellés loves him. Like, tailed off a little bit towards the end of last season, but I still think he was by far.
But it was the most productive season he had.
Yeah,
8 goals.
Our resurgence. 11 assists, was it in the end, Chris?
Yeah, quite a few assists.
Our resurgence with Aziz was like, it's like they're the same thing. When he hit form, we hit form. Like, when he was off, we looked rubbish. It's like, it's just, if he can develop that consistency to his game, like, he'll be another one that will go. I thought he was gone this summer. I really did. And like,
I think the emergence of Sam Smith, him coming back and having a focal point forward, where we didn't have that for the first few months, a couple of months of the season, due to Sam, that really coincided with Femi Aziz's upturn in form, because he had a focal point up front that he could then play into.
Yeah,
I think that was the big point.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Left wing problem area. I think that's where we're going to make a signing. We don't really have one again. Paul McCairu's left.
Yeah,
like, Sellés tried a lot of people there as well. Like,
Ben Elliott, he can play there.
Ben Elliott was better in the middle.
Get him in the middle, like, so he's a waste. He's wasted out there. Kelvin, same with Kelvin. I'm not going to.
He's better up to. Although he did curl one in one game,
but again, like, he can do that in 10-15 minute spells when he's thrown on, and I think, like, he's not a left winger. He's a striker that's it to go through. And then the midfield's interesting because, like, so Lewis Wing is the guaranteed starter.
Yeah.
Like, just a ludicrous season last season. His missus is great. Like, he, like, I think he's gonna prove to be, like, he feels like the player that could kick on, like, at another level. He's like, I think the way I explained it to Lewis Wing was the only Reading player last season who walked into every other League One team.
And also, I'd say a couple of championship sides as well.
Yeah, he's such an incisive ball, isn't he?
The fact that we managed to sneak him under QPR as well was interesting. The fact that he chose us over QPR was interesting, considering they're in the championship and we're not.
But I mean, as we sort of found out, I think he got sold a bed of lies, as his wife has now revealed. But so I think it's weird, and then it's a little bit of who do you like for his partner. Like, so Charlie Savage is still there, and Michael Craig is there, and Ben Elliott's there. And
I like Michael Craig. I think Michael Craig was very underrated in that side, in terms of, again, our upturn in form coincided with him coming into the team and taking that role on from Hutchinson, because he's always a pass first forward defensive midfielder, and also he's very good at doing the other side, and you can tell he was at a Premier League academy, because we picked him up from Tottenham a couple of seasons ago. And again, he's another one that I would think, with a full season, a bit like Gelben Abrefa, if we can get him tied down a long-term contract, give him that position he plays in a team, he could be another one that we move on.
Chris, do you think that instinct of a midfielder to play forward early is quite a useful one for what Rubén Sellés wants? Because
because he wants quick, incisive passing. And Michael Craig provides that. He's a typical, you don't think he should be playing that position because of his height player, but he is very good in that position. And yes, he tailed off towards the end of last season, but again, that's his first full season as a pro. He got a few games the previous season, but that was his first full season. So you were talking about a lot of what the Americans call rookies last season, and I think what Rubén Sellés was able to develop was a very good team unit, which is something we hadn't had for a long time. And a blend that you could see towards the end of the season was starting to gain traction.
Chris, can we zoom in on Rubén Sellés? Because what I'm really curious to ask you about is how he's been able to galvanise Reading fans and get people on board. And the one thing that stands out to me, I wasn't actually there, but I've seen the sort of post-match scenes. You lost at Leyton Orient around the middle of the season.
Yeah.
And fans were very unhappy, obviously, naturally, with where the club is, the ownership and all that sort of thing. And to an extent, I don't want to sort of exaggerate this, but maybe to an extent, because the staff and the players were there, they were the ones that maybe taking the brunt of it a bit. And what I loved about how Rubén Sellés handled that moment was because he literally got all the players to stand side by side in front of the fans and literally just watch the fans express their anger for about a minute. Might have been less than that, I'm not sure. But then he went in after they'd done that and went in and sort of tried to talk to them. And what I thought was really, I think that shows great emotional intelligence, because I can imagine a lot of managers in that situation would have tried to either get all the players away and like, we don't want to get involved, or they might have rushed in and sort of tried to heal things too quickly and then ended up getting into an argument or whatever. So actually, I thought Rubén Sellés handled that really well.
I think you're right.
Moment...
I think you're right in respect of, first of all, he's the only one at the club in terms of anyone that has any influence. He communicates, he talks, he has that openness. Secondly, I think we were a bit jaded with managers who had come in. I mean, the famous example was Brendan Rodgers, who inherited a side from Coppell, and famously, obviously, he gave quite a few players who went on to be part of that championship winning side in 11-12 their debuts, and in Karachan and Sigurdsson and all the, but it was, it didn't quite work. So we were a bit jaded by these ideal managers who want to get the ball down and pass it and create movement. But he has managed to win fans over, like myself, because I think after the Shrewsbury defeat, where we were 2-1 up and we managed to blow it within 2 minutes of the end, that was, I think, a lot of Reading fans were like, no, enough is enough.
Do you know what? I actually saw Sim on the train that evening, and I chatted to him, and I was almost trying to have a football conversation with Sim at that moment, but he was so depressed about it all. He just like, I'm not having it. But it was like,
but ever since that point, that game was almost like a big catalyst for what then happened. But he communicated. He was brave enough to make decisions. I mean, that's what Reading fans have been crying out for absolute years in a manager.
What do you mean, Chris, by brave enough to make decisions? Can you elaborate?
We had to suffer through Paul Clement. I mean, Yapstam kind of was doing that when he first came into the club, in the respect of he wouldn't take any nonsense. But then obviously things changed, because obviously then Dai came in his second season. And I think we could see the start of really the decline, because obviously Yapstam was, again, he being Dutch, he's very direct. So he was
his football wasn't.
His football wasn't, but again, it was kind of that.
That's very good. I like that.
But he was very much, it's my way or the highway. And if you didn't fit in with that, you were gone. And again, like you could see with the example with Rubén Sellés of Sam Hutchinson. And when we first signed Sam Hutchinson, I thought, okay, we're a struggling team. We need a bit of experience. He can bring that. But actually, he was just awful. He was a yellow card, red card waiting to happen literally every game. And to kind of break with that and trust in Michael Craig, who, as I said, hadn't had much first team experience, but to bring him in was, again, a brave decision.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a team that's rooted to the bottom of League One, as we were at the time. We couldn't buy a win. We couldn't do anything right or well. he kind of started to kind of get traction. And then obviously we climbed up to about 17th. I mean, I think we finished 17th last season. And it was quite comfortable in the end. But he kind of built a sort of a rapport with fans that we haven't seen since the days of McDermott. And even I would argue Nigel Atkins, because Nigel Atkins is the nicest bloke you're ever going to meet. And again, given now what we know about the problems at the club, then with not having tax bills paid and having to sell players to cover those bills, we now know the miracle of the job that Nigel Atkins did in terms of just missing out on the playoffs. His season. But we haven't had a rapport with a manager this strong since McDermott. Really, I think that's a fair comment.
Yeah. No, I think I like. There's not a lot I disagree with on Chris. I think I think he also did the siege mentality thing.
Yeah.
And I think like he did a really good interview where he said, like, look, at the start of it, I was really obsessed with what was happening behind the scenes of the ownership. By the end of the season, I was just 100% committed to training and playing with these players. Now, I think my criticism of him, which is interesting with Chris's point, like, I think he struggled. I think his strength could also be a weakness, which I don't think he does as well with experienced players. And that's something I distinctly remember with Brendan Rodgers happening as well, was when it was going well for him. It was just like, oh, I'm just going to throw the kids in. And so I think it's a coach's thing to do, to bring in younger, impressionable players. And I think I think
maybe there's I don't necessarily know that I see that as a negative thing, because I think, first of all, younger players just have this hunger to absorb new ideas that can be much easier sometimes from a coaching point of view. Secondly, if you want to play a high pressing game, that's much easier with younger players as opposed to older players. And thirdly, younger players actually have more sell-on value anyway.
Yeah.
So I actually think, given where Reading are, where it's much more for Reading about rebuilding something over the long term, why not use this opportunity to build an exciting young team over a couple of seasons, especially if you can get new owners in, and actually think of it as a rebuilding stage rather than
because you like Chris said it earlier, because you still need a blend. And and the amount of times young footballers make mistakes that older footballers do not cost Reading points loads of times in the season. The amount of times we conceded in the last 10 minutes, even after we had the kickback, it was still happening a hell of a lot, which is maturity and not knowing how to close a game out and not knowing how to run it into the corner and just slowing it down. And
there was an example in the Northampton game, sorry, Greg, where it was a win, a win that we needed at the time, and Big Kelvin came off the bench and scored a screamer. But there was a moment where Ben Elliott, who was playing centrally in the first game, in one of his first games centrally for us, made a horrendous mistake on the halfway lane and got caught. And it was only a big save by Joel Pereira that kind of kept it at 0-0. And that an experienced player in that position, he tried to beat a man, got caught on the ball. He was the last man. A more experienced player would have just knocked that ball out of play, allowed his teammates to filter back, and then you go again. But it was kind of, he tried to do a bit of skill that in a position where it was so dangerous to do it. And it's learning for Ben Elliott. He is a very skillful player, but it's learning when to produce those moments.
In general, Gab, I agree with you, though, mate. I think, look, you didn't. I just think we have literally no experienced player. Lewis Wing's probably the most experienced player we've got, and was.
Harley Dean technically is, but he wasn't really playing last season. After he was another one of the
mature Harley Dean. It's like he's experienced, but that doesn't mean that he's
there's in the same way. I mean, I'm 36. I'm an experienced centre back now, but I'm not going to play for Reading. It's just we've had a history over recent years of bringing these players in.
Scott Dan was one that we brought in, and amazingly, we kind of binned off. I can't remember which player was it that we got rid of to keep him on another year's deal that he never played. I can't quite remember.
Was it one of you good centre backs that's come through the academy, like Dom Hyam and?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't an experienced centre back. It was. I can't quite remember who it was, but we had a choice and we backed the wrong horse essentially.
Yeah, it was a classic good idea in theory, but the problem is because we were scraping like from the very bottom of the barrel. That even like it's a great Game of Thrones episode. What's it called? It's something like Bastards and Broken Things. Is basically what we were left with, and so it's Scott Dan on paper, great idea, and you're there like if he had been able to stay fit, great. How on earth he passed a medical is like it's like there are like I don't understand how but like it's those sort of decisions where like every player we bought had something fundamentally wrong with them. So like Andy Carroll like was at the point of his career where he literally couldn't run and was being asked to play pressing football.
I mean, I remember one point with Andy Carroll. It was Millwall at home. We ended up losing the game 1-0. And Millwall are known for physicality in their sides. And the ball was hooked up to Andy Carroll. He had about 4 Millwall defenders around him. No Reading player near him. And he won the ball, but then he had no layoff to it. I just remember Andy Carroll with his arms outstretched thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing? And it was just like, that summed up Paul in every single way. Like, get it launched, get it into Andy Carroll, and we'll play off the pieces. But we didn't even do that.
There's the thing. Yeah, to your point, like, look, you follow Football League a lot, right? The thing that I was most shocked about was the drop in quality from Championship to League One. Like, it really is like a huge drop. Like, and it takes some. And so I think we've got players who like so Ben Elliott. I'm excited about as a central midfielder. I think he's got high ceiling. Like he's probably also the rawest.
What's his biggest strength, Ben Elliott, for you?
So he can pick a pass. He's cute on the ball, and he looks like the sort of player that can unlock. And
I think he's a John Swift type, without sort of the ability to sort of take on commit players. He's a good footballer. What I would determine the word footballer. Like he can, as Greg said, he has an eye for a pass. He can open up teams.
I've just seen Chris. He's got into the Cameroon national team in the last year. That's incredible. Cameroon.
He's only about 20. But yeah, I mean, he was at the Cup of Nations this in January.
That's incredible achievement. He's not played that much, but why?
But he came through the Chelsea Academy.
But he's not playing for Reading.
If you have knowledge,
another one that came through the Chelsea Academy that we picked up, akin to John Smith.
Have you only just picked him up?
John Smith.
No, so it's got him at the start of the season, but like he was another
bench a lot.
He was another free, but off the bench a lot.
He took a long time to get into the team, didn't he, Greg?
Yeah,
he was one that took a long time to get the trust of Sellers, but once he did, he was in that team. He was one of the first names on it.
He's definitely found his home in central midfield rather than being on the wing. Like he was like he basically found his way. Like the left wing spot has been like Gareth Southgate and England's central midfield spot of like Sellers tried a few different things of which none were really any good. And
and that's where I think Kamara coming back might be useful.
Well, I'm actually wondering.
Or you have a kid in Basel, Tuma, who's coming again, an academy prospect, who's like whose sprint speed is like phenomenal. I think he ran 100 meters when he was an Eton school student. He ran 100 meters in 11 seconds or something stupid.
Full Maltese international.
Another weird one. Coming from I think a Kenyan or African, Ugandan background, so East African background.
Because the names I had in terms of coming through the 21s was Borginis and Charlie Wellens.
Charlie Wellens excited me when I saw him. Obviously, he is the son of Richie Wellens, who is the Leighton Orient manager. And obviously Richie Wellens, he had a good career. I believe he started at Man United, like Charlie did.
Yeah.
And then obviously dropped down into the lower leagues where he played the majority of his career. But when I saw him for the under-21s, he was very good. He was kind of again in that solid central midfield, box to box kind of role. That we don't really have that kind of midfielder at the moment.
So I'm wondering, in terms of the midfield, so I didn't actually realise that Ben Elliott was, I didn't have him in my head as being as good as we've just kind of like touched on. So I'm wondering, Matthew Craig, Ben Elliott and Lewis Wing, Greg, do you think that could be a midfield three for Reading?
Hang on, Michael. No, so Michael Craig. So no, the four
Michael
would be
Craig, Matthew's his brother.
Yes, that's right. So Michael, so the three in the middle will be Wing, Nibs as like the advanced one.
Of course, Nibs, yeah.
And then take your pick from the rest. Now, I think it also slightly depends on who we're playing, because I think Sellés started getting into the habit of game we fancied to win or have more of the ball, Savage and Elliott. Game we thought we might have less of the ball, he picked Michael Craig.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the rhythm he was getting into.
And I don't think it's a bad rhythm to be in, because, again, it's a strange position to be in. But if you keep that rhythm up at the start of the season, say, I know we go to Birmingham at the start of the season, so I'd expect Michael midfield three of Craig, Wing, and maybe Savage.
Well, what I would say, Chris, if you don't mind me coming in on this, certainly from his time at Wycombe, very much the view was that although Lewis Wing was highly creative and one of their best players in 22-23, it was kind of widely accepted that he couldn't put a challenge in. So if we're saying that Harvey Nibs is going to play as the number 10, I think you need the extra midfielder to be able to put...
But that's my point. Then you have Savage and Craig in there being the link players and the destroyers, because that's what... I mean, Savage is more of a box-to-boxer, I guess.
Yeah. But is there going to be room for Charlie Savage, though, Chris? Because if we're saying Nibs is going to play as the 10, and then we're saying Lewis Wing's got to play, so then you've got lots of midfielders competing for one spot then.
It's almost like I would swap some of our midfielders for a left-back, if we can do that. If we can do the good old American trade.
Yeah. I think, like... Gab, your point is largely spot on. Be fair, like that's a slight mischaracterization of Lewis Wing. Like he puts in, but like
to be fair, that was a review of him at Wycombe, rather.
Yeah, like like put it this way, he's not an enforcer, but he doesn't shirk it. He doesn't like think he wins a bit of ball back. Like I don't, but to your point, like it depends on my thing with Sellés. Is it like he doesn't. We don't win the ball back with big crunching physical challenges. We win the ball back with little nippy.
Yeah, or pressing quite high.
It's pressing football. So we're not. So look again. Me with my Gamini games gone approach was I would like a bastard in there who can mix it up a bit.
That was meant to be role. But he couldn't even do that. He was just picking up card after card after card.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's like again, Sam. Basically, it's like we lack bastards, and I think that's the thing in League One where you see it where it's just like look. Sellés did a great interview, which made me have so much respect for him because he realised what he changed. He basically, when he did in 4-2-4, it was still a high press, but what he sort of learnt in League One was that you can't press if the centre backs are chomping it straight to the big man up top. It's like one of the best ways to kill a press is play Route 1 football. And so the amount of goals we used to concede where we do a press and then a Michael Morrison at Cambridge would boot one over the top of us, and it felt sort of it. So when he changed it to be a more of a narrow press and a one, and it was almost on the second press rather than the first press. It was a lot more successful.
And that press was triggered by Sam Smith, who, to all intents and purposes, is still one of the best strikers in this division.
Talk to me about Sam Smith, Chris. How important do you think he's going to be this season?
Massive. I mean, I mentioned him earlier in the upturn in form, but he made such a difference to our team, because Kelvin Etienne-Batterman is a good footballer, but he's raw. He can't do the things that Sam Smith does. Sam Smith would win you fouls. He would hold the ball up, and also he would do the thing of dropping in deep into that space and allowing Aziz and Nibs to go beyond him, and they would be the forward players at times. But he also knows where the back of the net is, and I can't stress enough that we haven't had a forward like him in a long time, where he just knows where to get a goal from, and he's brilliant at that. He just pops up with a goal. I mean, I think considering he started the season late, I mean, he didn't get back fit until October last season. To get 16, 17 goals is still a fair return.
Certainly is.
And his return really saw the uptick in our form. And
So Chris, you mentioned, I think it's a great point, by the way, Sam Smith, and how important he's going to be, especially with the way that you play. I wanted to just finish off any young lads coming through the under-20. You said that
Jaden Wareham.
Jaden Wareham,
big one to watch. Again,
okay.
He's a full. He's like he's more. I think he's more this season might be an impact player off the bench, in respect of he lacks a bit of physicality, but he's a finisher.
I think he's built like an ox. He's built like.
I mean, the game I saw him in for the under-21s, he was getting a bit bullied by their centre backs at times. It felt like, but he knows what. Again, he's another one who scored a lot of goals for the under-21s last season, so he knows where the back of the net is. The best way of describing Jaden Wareham is he's a pest, right? He's a pest. He runs. He puts players under pressure, and that again, that's why I say he's probably better coming off the bench if we're a couple of goals up to the good, because he will keep that press going high. He will keep that press going. He will make sure that those defenders do not have a minute on the ball, any time on the ball, and that's important. So Jaden Wareham's one to watch. And I think also, I don't know how close he's going to be back, but Miles Coke-Smith as well. He got injured but he was really tearing it up for the under-21s. Like, he was very, very good.
Smith, sorry.
Miles Coke-Smith, yeah, it's a triple barrel surname, because that's where footballers are now. we're beyond the double barreled. We're now onto the triple barreled. But again, I haven't actually seen him play, but his stats for the under-21s were very impressive before he got injured. So there are players that are pushing through, but again, we are going to be relying on them more so than new signings, it feels like, until maybe we get this ownership.
Yeah, I quite like the look of him. He's built like he's built like Shaqiri. Like, he's got that sort of power cube build. He's not very
it's a good description. Yeah,
like he's like he looks like he'll put himself. He missed an absolute golden chance last game of the season, which I think would have been a really lovely moment for him, like, to come through. But like, he's the one that's. I always think a good sign is who's knocking on the door on the subs bench and stuff like that. I think you get the impression that Sellers likes him. And it's a take your pick, like John Ryan. Like, I've got to get my Ryans and my Clarks mixed up, but was it John Clark who basically went on a bit of a goal scoring spree?
Yeah, he scored twice against Nottingham Forest in that under-21s game.
Yeah,
like, he's a very good player.
I mean, if he can play midfield and left back, that's certainly interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, he's the one that I like. As I said, it's difficult because I'm in London now. When I was a kid, I used to actually go and watch a lot of under-21s football because thing. But now that I live in Fulham now, so I don't. That's the part of my life that's gone now. But the bit where you like the look of it is, like, for example, like Chris mentioned Basil Toomey. I saw him play against Ipswich in the cup, and he looked very, very raw, but electrically quick, but just couldn't seem to get on the ball. And so I think he's always think about youth players in terms of tiering, and I think he's the next tier down. I'd say from like Jaden Wareham. But Jaden Wareham is turning up on the bench when there's injuries. He's been given the odd minute. Tuma's not there yet. I think he's in the first round of the Carabao Cup and Football League trophy sort of.
I see. Yeah.
Like, so I think he's a stage down. I think John Ryan and John Clark have featured on the bench last season. I think definitely.
Yeah,
John Clark.
they did at stages. Yeah, I mean, John Ryan, again, having just seen him play once, and this is just my initial impression, he's very good, very technical. He does like a challenge, but as I said, he was playing right back that day rather than left back.
It could be a bit of a Dennis Irwin then.
Was it?
Hey, if he has the career of Dennis Irwin, he's been brilliant.
Was he? Which one of them was at the Italian club? Was it one of them? One of them was at Sassuolo.
No, it was John Ryan. John Ryan was. We picked him up, from Sassuolo.
It implies he's got a little something about him, but like,
he definitely has a bit of culture about him, and again, he doesn't mind a challenge. There was a couple of challenges in that game that I watched him in. That again, 50-50s. He didn't mind going in for them, and I like that in a player. I want that in a player, that you don't shirk anything. And
basically, our entire left-hand side is up for grabs.
Yeah,
which is.
I suspect Dorset will start at left back again.
Oh, really? I would have thought. I mean, it depends whether the ownership situation changes and whether you can be active in the transfer window.
If we're talking about current situation, it will be probably Yeardom, Bindon, and Bengay and Dorset with Pereira in goal. That'd be your defence.
Okay.
And
well,
but the more important thing is, at least we're getting names on the team sheet. That we know
and also, Chris, what I think is a really good thing is the strength of the academy might be able to carry you through a little bit while some of the ownership stuff is up in the air. And it does, and a young squad does suit the manager. So having a great academy is a bit of a saving grace potentially. With that in mind, Chris, I want to come to you on this. Expectations for this season. It's a difficult one to say without knowing what the ownership situation is. I mean, if you could get off-field change and another mid-table finish whilst continuing to develop some of those young talents, would that be considered a good season for you?
Yes, I think I sort of see this season as what last season should have been, in terms of if we get this new ownership sorted, we need to stabilise before we can even think about going back into the Championship. Right, and that's obviously all in an idealized world, of course. I mean, I'm not gonna start talking about that stuff, but we struggled last season because again, everything was behind, everything was a struggle from minute one. Now the ownership situation is still not sorted, but because we've now got a base of a team that we know, and we know what they're capable of, and they are experienced of playing together, that helps. So I think mid-table will be a good result, maybe even pushing on the outskirts of the playoffs. I'm not saying if we get a flyer, if we get off to a flyer, there is a possibility.
Okay.
I'm not saying as I've disappeared.
Hopefully,
I'm not saying that is the case. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's kind of possibility that we might be pushing distantly for a playoff spot towards the end of the season. We might be in those conversations because as I said, we do have players who know where the back of the net is and can do it on a regular basis, and that is such an important thing in this. At any level of football, but particularly in League One. If you've got goal scorers, you've got a chance.
You certainly have. Greg, what's the biggest reason to believe Reading will meet their ambitions this season?
Pretty much what Chris said. We've got goals. And I think that's good. Like in an understatement way. We're not a million miles off on the playing side of it. Like, I don't think we are. Like, if you took the momentum we got into, if you took the momentum we just got at the back end of last season into the start of the league season, go through. I had my wisest tweet that aged especially well last year was, I said something like, when we were in September, October, I said something along the lines of, you've got to bear in mind we haven't had a pre-season.
Yeah.
We're going to be dumped till October, November at least. And I think I said October and it was November we sort of turned around. So I was off by about a month, but fundamentally we didn't have a pre-season.
Yeah.
And now I think we're players short, but whereas last season we were 11 players short,
yeah,
I think we're now 2 or 3 players. So the core group are going to have a pre-season together. The squad isn't going to change much. So you'd like to think go through. Now, it might mean we might lose the element of surprise against a couple of people who sort of wouldn't have had a big scouting report on the likes of Femi Aziz, and they do now, and all the rest of it. But that's a reason to be positive too. And if Sam Smith starts the season fit, goals, Nibs goals, Aziz goals, Wing goals, and that's 4 players. I think that's a good stat last season. It was the first time in like many a season that we had 4 players who'd scored over 10 goals in the season, which was not there's enough there. Sort the wings out, not Lewis, the entire left side. And I think we'll be fine. I think Chris is right. I still think we're lacking a little bit of savvy to go up this season, and it's still.
I thought you had savvy in midfield.
Very good. It's tricky because it's like, again, it's so hard to separate the playing bit and the backroom bit.
Yeah,
and actually, but if they maintain the same siege mentality and it's basically the same group of players, they are going to have a pre-season. And like, look,
and it's a young group who, in theory, might get better.
Exactly. We're not going to get relegated. I think anything less than top half would be considered a failure. I think.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
Playoffs may be a bit of a stretch. But put it this way, like, great point when Chris was talking about Sellés was all the way through. I remember thinking, especially after Shrewsbury, like, he should have been sacked. And I think in a normal circumstance, he would have been sacked.
Oh yeah.
He would have been. So there's a great lesson there about giving managers time to turn it around. Admittedly, ours wasn't artificially. We were never going to sack him.
Greg, can I play a devil's advocate? I mean, to say anything other than top half would be a failure, and that you should be targeting trying to get into the playoffs. I'm just wondering, is that a bit of a statement to make at this stage when there's so much ambiguity over ownership, and we've had situations in the recent past where the current owners, who we don't know if they'll be the owners come the start of the season, but right now they are the owners, and it's not like there's major reports on that changing. Is there a danger that HMRC bills aren't going to get paid and players aren't going to get paid, and is there the danger that some of these problems are going to resurface? Who's to say that they're not going to resurface?
So maybe, I think, like, look, to address your first point, I very deliberately didn't say playoffs because
okay, all right, yeah, I'll give you that.
I'm not. I think, but I just think, like, look, if you took the same squad that we had at the end of last season, which is what we've got, we've had no major losses, and we've had, like, we might at some point gain. I just think, like, if that squad finishes below in the bottom half, then they've not improved. Like as
no. But what if the financial issues resurface where players don't get paid?
If they resurface in the form of players not getting paid and points deductions, then yeah, like, you'd have to address. But if you take the point that we have got the same core group of players and everything, we're not going to get another points deduction. For what it's worth, like, I'm moderately comfortable that we won't get a points deduction in the first half of the season for HMRC stuff.
I mean, they don't count in the second half.
I mean, the brilliant. There was a brilliant sweep by Reading. We had a double win that first couple of weeks of the season. It was Cheltenham and then Bolton. And I think they put up a tweet saying, "Oh, what a brilliant 5-point week!" Because even in our glory moments at the start of last season, we still got a points deduction of a point, so we didn't even get the full points. So it was just like there was no joy. But I think another thing to touch on as well is the fact that we are starting a season with the same manager for the first time. Well, since Paunovic, but Paunovic didn't last too much longer into the second season. Oh no, actually,
Norley
did,
Atkins in 2014.
Yeah, so we're actually having consistency of training. The players are getting that consistency of coaching, and that plays a big point as well, because actually they will hope they should have a much better understanding of what Rubén Sellés is asking of them than what the same situation was last summer. So it is, I think that's a big point and in particular when you have such a great turnover in management in football these days, to start the season with the same manager when we're not used to it is such a big thing.
That's a big plus for sure. What's your biggest reason for doubt, Chris?
Well, I think you touched on it. It's off-field issues kind of coming back to the fore. I mean, this is why I think, again, the pressure needs to be maintained on Mr. Yongge to sell, or Mr. Dai to sell. He has been the biggest, and I mean the biggest hindrance to our football club going forward. I mean, we got relegated because of his negligence. Had we not had those 6 points deducted, we might still be a championship club now. I doubt it.
Yeah.
Because I think we would have just avoided going down that season, but we wouldn't have avoided going down last season. No way.
Yeah.
But we might have been a bit more attractive to sell. That so it's a double-edged sword there. But that is the main worry, is that this ownership situation just drags on, continues to drag on, and we don't get anything done. We don't sign a player. We don't, and we might lose a couple of players as well because they go, stop this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Greg, too early for a prediction, I think, but give me a number between 1 and 10 to denote your level of optimism that your ambitions are going to be realised. 10 being the most optimistic.
6. That's
a little bit higher than I thought you would say.
Yeah, no, it's just like I'm an eternal optimist at heart. And it's just I don't think we're I can't begin to express how grateful I am to Rubén Sellés for I'm 4 weeks into having my second child, which is a boy, and
congratulations.
I wasn't a million miles away from forcing Rubén, and then went with Louis in the end. But my missus wasn't against Rubén until she found out it was the Reading manager's name, and it was just I'm just eternally grateful that he was able to turn it around, because if we were a League 2 club, I don't think we would have existed. I think we'd be done, or we'd have been cooked, and I think we would have been. Yeah, I don't think we would have come back from that for a very long time, and I think so I'm very grateful.
I mean, I think the prospect of being a non-national league club was, my biggest fear when we got relegated from the Championship was we would drop straight through and actually do a Portsmouth, but worse.
Yeah, it could have been. It was there were points last season where it's just oh god, this could be bad, and we were talking I think we would have been starting -12 in League 2 and stuff, and so I think. I
mean, I mean, you touched on it possibly earlier that there is the possibility of administration. So again, the playing staff and Rubén Sellés might be dealing with a 12-point deduction at the start of the season, which again isn't impossible to get out of. We've seen it done before.
Yeah.
But it will hinder any sort of possibility.
Put it this way: I don't think anything on the pitch. It's how it's again when we talked about the balance about what cuts. It's if there isn't if not enough is cut to undermine Rubén Sellés and the players and the project, that's where my confidence comes from. It's
Yeah.
I don't think I have faith in the current crop of players are more than good enough to be a top half finish in League One. There was a body of Reading fans who think Reading still underachieved last season, and I'm not a million miles from being there if it hadn't been for the pre-season. And so, like my read of last season was I was the other way around last season, but there was Reading fans saying we're going to go straight back up, we're going to be there. I was just like, guys, cannot go straight back up, challenge for playoffs when you don't have a pre-season and every other team did.
No,
and you're just
and that really showed. I mean, I remember going to the Peterborough game. That was the first home game. I went off on holiday the following day, actually, and you could see the golfing class between Peterborough and Reading that day. But then when we played them again later on, I think it was around Christmas period, the gap sort of closed. And we battled to a 2-2 draw, you know, and I again, we had chances in that game that we could have won it. They had chances. It was a 50-50 game. Whereas at the start of the season, it wasn't a 50-50 game. You know, they were so much sharper. They were so much better. I mean, in Peterborough, I think almost like Peterborough are the club we need to become in at this level. We need an owner who knows how to manage and run a football club. Durham Anthony, I don't always agree with everything he says, but again, he's another owner that I admire at this club. In this game, he knows how to run a football club and knows how to get the best out of his side.
Yeah, certainly does.
They are eternally challenging to get into the Championship. So it's that, you know, if there's another Durham Anthony, or I mean, Cohig wouldn't be so bad, but again, as I said before Greg got on, I mean, it's going to be interesting given everything that went down. But it's difficult. It really is difficult until such time as something moves with this ownership. We are still in the dark as to really what's going to go on.
I think what's funny with Cohig, if it is Cohig and fingers crossed, like, it won't take a lot to win Reading fans over.
No.
Just because
run the club properly and you'll be fine.
Just because he's not Dai Yongge. Like, there will need to be we probably need to have a water under the bridge chat, but it wouldn't need to be. It wouldn't need to be much more than that. Like, the first fans forum would be a bit spicy, but it wouldn't need much more than that. But again, it all comes down to communication.
Yeah.
It's just like
certainly will. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think from what we need is another Medeski type. He's going to just come in, run the club properly, because we all agree everything's in place to do that. I mean, we've got
a
better
lot of things
facilities
in place,
than a lot of even
Championship
clubs. I mean, you've got Championship clubs that would kill for the setup that Reading have. And yet, and I know even go to your club, Gabe. If you could exchange Reading's training ground and ground for what Birmingham currently have, you would. And that's the bizarre thing about this story, is that everything is geared to having a successful Championship side, realistically, who touches on the Premier League every so often, right? But that has been squandered by an owner that, as I said at the start of this conversation, who should never have been even anywhere near getting hands on our club.
100%.
And again, that's on an organisation named the EFL that I won't go into more detail, but they need to be held to account more for the decisions they make around ownership decisions. And I grant you, this was a previous regime that made the majority of these choices and to a certain extent, the current CEO, Trevor Birch, they're being left to pick up a bit of a mess. The previous person in charge of that organization left, in terms of there are a lot of bad owners in the EFL. I mean, we have the example of Blackburn at the moment. I mean, I grant you they took over when they were in the Premier League, the Vengies, but there's rumours now that they're going to be paying their female players £9,000 a year.
It's an absolute disgrace,
And you're almost like Rick Parry and Trevor Birch are having to pick up a mess. And now, whether they're doing a good job or not, I can't really comment.
No.
I mean, Greg's been in conversations with those guys more so than me, but at least we're on the agenda. Now, that's where we are, but it needs to change. That's all I know. It needs to happen.
It needs to change, absolutely. Listen, thank you so much for your insight. It's been a very difficult time for Reading, and I think it goes without saying that getting Dai Yongge out of Reading Football Club is going to be a huge step towards the club making the long-term progress that it needs. But more, as importantly, you need to get the right new owners in, and hopefully you can do that. Such a pleasure to chat to you both this evening. Be sure to follow Sell Before We Die on socials, and go and visit their website, because they're doing some incredible work as a protest group. Thanks to Chris Hartley as well for your insight. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Reading Deep Dive, and it has been very much a deep dive this evening as well. Gone on for a while, this one. But no, it's been really interesting, and I think we need to take that time to get into the issues.
I know, and I must add as well, Turkey have just knocked out Austria.
Oh, well, there you go. Absolutely.
The goalkeeper's made an absolutely incredible save.
Absolutely incredible save, yeah.
Well,
sorry if you're watching this instead of that. Fucking hell.
So we'll wrap it up now.
I've kind of kept an eye on it, half an eye on it, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. This has been the EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive, and we'll see you again very soon. Subscribe, by the way, on YouTube and Spotify.
Cheers, Gabe.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you.